Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's Ask a Recruiter event. Today, I am here with Karina, and we are going to talk about how to negotiate an offer of employment. So, Karina has a lot of awesome tips to share, some tricks. We're going to walk through the whole process. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in whatever comment box you are looking at this on. It could be LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and we'll make sure we get to those. And if you have one after the fact, then don't forget to join us in the collaboratory Slack room. We'll drop the link for that as well. All right, Karina, you want to go ahead and kick us off?
Sure. Yeah. So offers are scary, but I have been on the other side of the table for years, meaning that I'm the one doing the presenting of the offers for lots of different companies. So I'm going to walk you through the whole process of getting an offer, the anatomy of an offer, what is and is not negotiable. And then I'm going to give you a simple playbook for negotiating your offer at the end. So it's going to be a pretty meaty episode of Ask a Recruiter. So we may not get to too many questions at the end, depending on how much time we have, but I'm always happy to answer them in the community. Let me just pop my slides up here. Okay, great. So, how to negotiate your offer of employment. I've got to get myself. Okay, there we go. The anatomy of an offer. So, first of all, if you are going to successfully negotiate your offer, you need to understand what makes up an offer. And if you've never been in industry yet, this is going to be new to you. Even if you have had a few different jobs in industry, I think you're going to learn through this presentation what is and is not actually negotiable in this process, and that might surprise you. So, the components of an offer are typically a base salary, which is your take-home pay, usually biweekly or twice a month. You may have a target bonus component. And this target bonus, we phrase it like this: target bonus, because it is just that. It is not a guarantee. It is a bonus that is made up of usually multiple components. And this is something that your recruiter or HR person can explain to you exactly what goes into this target bonus. It is different for different companies. Most typically, there are several pieces of this bonus. The first piece would be your own personal performance. And so a portion of this bonus, usually 50% or 40%, is made up of your performance. Then the company's performance is also taken into account. So if the company does not have a good year and they're not doing well, or you miss targets, let's say, for example, I've seen this happen. There was a target for your company to file an IND by the end of the year. If that target is not met, that may affect everybody's bonus because that was a bonusable event. So keeping in mind that the whole company as a whole has to sort of pull together, it's supposed to motivate people to kind of be working toward that common goal, not just their own individual goals. And then sometimes there is another component of that, which is just a pure discretionary component. And that usually is determined at the team level. And so you can learn a lot about the structure of that bonus from your recruiter or the HR person. They should be able to unpack that for you so you kind of fully understand that target bonus piece. It's a little complicated. Next piece is the benefits. And this is not something that you're going to feel on a week-to-week basis in your bank account. But if you don't have a good benefits package, you will feel it when you need it. So for instance, health insurance is very typically covered in biotechs. It's a pretty competitive industry for attracting the best talent. So what we tend to see is that health insurance and these benefits packages are fairly strong in biotech companies, even smaller companies. Some of them are going to have different components of this health insurance benefit. So you're going to want to, again, ask for that. Usually at the offer stage, you can get a full, usually a PDF document that explains the whole plan so that you are very prepared to understand it. And the very most generous packages, you may even have a health savings account that the company sets up on your behalf and contributes to cover your deductibles. So that's the very far end of like the most generous there. That would be that your entire plan is covered plus your deductible is covered. Usually there are varying degrees of that. So again, it's really important to understand that because those are thousands of dollars you're talking about. That's not a small amount of money when you're thinking about your total compensation. The next thing within this benefits world, and I think we have a whole Ask a Recruiter on this, so I can just refer you to that. I think Kyle unpacked the benefits for us previously, but you might have short and long-term disability, you might have dental, vision, there might be a lot of other components to this benefits package. And Some companies have really fun benefits too, like pet insurance. So kind of getting the lay of the land on what those benefits are will be, in your best interest at this stage, because it's going to weigh into your overall determination. And we have seen candidates make decisions based on the benefits package alone, that they've determined that benefits package was so strong that was going to be more important than perhaps their target bonus or their base salary. So that is a big component of your pay. The next thing is so variable company to company. And again, your recruiter or HR person who is presenting the offer should be able to tell you about this. But the equity or stock component, if there is one, could be a significant amount of money, but it's not realized immediately. So when you're thinking about paying your bills, paying your rent, your mortgage, paying for groceries, usually this is not factored into that decision. So keeping that in mind is also really important. And then the next piece is potentially a signing bonus. And this signing bonus I have one more slide. It's going to go behind my head here. So the signing bonus would be something that is payable usually on your first paycheck. So we call it a signing bonus. It's a little bit of a misnomer, and first-time job seekers are often very confused by this, because actually it's going to be a bonus that comes in on your first paycheck. So you will not realize that bonus before you start working. That bonus is going to be taxable too. That's another thing we can talk about a little bit later, but know that bonuses are taxed about 35%. So it's a big chunk that's going to go away from that bonus immediately. So if you're quoted a signing bonus of $10,000, you may really only see a little north of $7,000 from that bonus. So knowing that is important. And there's a negotiation tool in there that I'm going to tell you about in a minute. And then relocation assistance. Sorry, it's behind my head, but relocation assistance would come in if you were going to be moving states or moving to, a significant distance. That usually also comes in the form, depends on the level, but that typically for most jobs comes in the form of a signing bonus. So you're not going to get that money until after you've relocated. So knowing that is very important as well when you're thinking about your financial considerations. If you are with a company that has the ability to relocate people through a service, which is increasingly more rare, to be honest, that may then be covered for you initially, and they will know that there's a negotiation piece there too. I'm going to talk all about this when we talk about negotiating bonuses, but that is a taxable benefit. So if you are relocated by your company, somebody is paying the taxes on that piece. So usually it's the company, but you may see that tax bill coming out of your salary too. So that's something to think about and discuss and to really understand as you're negotiating. Okay. Next up, we are going to talk about what of these pieces of the salary package is negotiable. So it's interesting because a lot of the time we will sit down with candidates and they will have a number in their head that, the base salary should be X. And it is hard for us to negotiate each of the different components because we need to maintain internal equity, which means that other people within the organization at the same level, the same title, the same responsibilities are going to be expecting that everyone's paid basically the same amount. That's just fair. And so if you come in and you say, well, the base salary, I'm just going to use round numbers because it's easier to communicate. Let's say that you get an offer of $100,000 base salary. If you were hoping for $120,000 in base salary, that's going to be a really big gap. And that's probably not going to be something that we can fully negotiate. So knowing each of these things and what is and is not negotiable is key. And when I talk about salary bands, what I mean bands as in BANDS, salary bands are the sort of guardrails between each of those levels. So if you come in at a certain level, you're going to be expecting to be within a band, and that band may have a low and a high number for a base salary, and there may be some other pieces in there. So that is what we talk about when we talk about maintaining internal equity. Okay, so we talked about these components, and I'm going to go through each one and talk about what's negotiable. So first of all, the base salary, that is typically negotiable, but not wildly negotiable. So again, to maintain internal equity and to keep you within the reasonable salary bands for your level, your title, and your responsibilities, there usually is a small window of negotiation there. And so knowing that is key. The target bonus percentage is usually not negotiable. That usually is level set per band. And so what we don't see is candidates able to negotiate an extra percent of a target bonus or something like that. That is typically set per your level. But if you are able to negotiate your base salary, you may have effectively negotiated that target bonus because it is typically a percentage of your base salary. So knowing that the base salary is the piece that you will be able to negotiate, and therefore it will affect your target bonus. All right, next up is the benefits. This I put as a yellow check mark because it's somewhat negotiable, sometimes negotiable. I'm going to talk about some cases where you might be able to negotiate some things in there when we get to the negotiation tactics. But keep in mind for now, it's got a yellow check mark. It's a maybe. Same thing with equity and stock. Typically not very negotiable. However, depending on the stage of the company, earlier stage companies typically have a little more wiggle room on negotiating this equity and stock. But know that if you're joining an earlier stage company and they give you more equity in the company, you will take probably longer to realize that equity. And any equity that you take in a small startup that is not publicly traded is going to require what we call a liquidity event. And that liquidity event is typically that the company is bought by another company. They license one of their assets. So if they have a therapeutic asset, they can license. That can be a liquidity event, or they are outright sold. So they're either acquired and sort of merged into a company, or they're outright sold, and that typically includes all the IP. And so in those cases, you will realize an equity payout, but until then, it's really not something you can take to the bank. And then the signing bonus, this is a good place to negotiate. This is my biggest green check. I will say that this is the easiest for us to negotiate on the HR and recruiter side because it doesn't affect those salary bands. We can give you a little bit of a lump sum up front, but do know that that doesn't then affect your next year's salary. So this is what you would be thinking of in terms of your total cash compensation at your year one salary. So it's a great way to get a little bit extra if that was, if that's necessary for your finances, but that's not going to carry over year to year unless you get a promotion. And finally, relocation assistance is typically quite negotiable. So if you are relocating, this is another place that we can negotiate. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to go through each of these components and talk about what you can and can't sort of expect to negotiate and some tactics within them. So the base salary, that's pretty self-explanatory. You would be asking outright for more dollars on that base salary. The target bonus, like I said, not typically negotiable. It's sort of by proxy negotiable. The benefits are not typically very negotiable, except that sometimes you can negotiate a little bit of an extra benefit. So really getting a full picture of the benefits package. Are they doing tuition reimbursement? If so, can you get the details on that? What is or is not reimbursable? Could you take a course that maybe isn't at an accredited university, but maybe it's at a community college or an online course? Would that qualify for that reimbursement? If you have it in your plan to become a manager and you are not yet a manager, or if you are a manager and you want to be a better manager, a great thing to negotiate into your benefits is either reimbursement for or the company outright paying for you to have an executive leadership coach. And this is something that companies are typically pretty willing to do because it benefits them directly because you are now leveling yourself up and therefore you are leveling them up. And if you can negotiate that into your benefits package, you may not see that in your bank account this year, but you're contributing to your overall development, which means that you're going to get more promotions in the future. The company is going to look on that really kindly, that you are developing yourself actively into that leadership or management position. And that's a pretty expensive thing, actually. Leadership coaching is not cheap. So it is not a tangible amount of money in your bank account this year, but it is in the future. So keep that in mind. This is a really great thing to negotiate, and it looks really good on you too if you negotiate for that. The equity and the stock component. This as I mentioned before, you may be able to negotiate a little bit. If you are at a larger company where they are publicly traded, typically that stock component is not very negotiable, but it is worth putting on the table as something that you would accept in a negotiation if you need more sort of total compensation. And then in terms of the signing bonus and the relocation assistance, here's my tip here. These bonuses, as I mentioned earlier, are taxable. A lot of the time, you can negotiate to get those bonuses what we call grossed up, which means that the company will pay the taxes on them. So while the bonus itself may not be bigger in your bank account, it will be bigger because you will not be paying the taxes on that. So keep that in mind as in your back pocket. If you are feeling like the negotiation, maybe the company has told you, oh, this is really a stretch for us. And you think, well, I really would love to have an extra few $1,000s. That could be the place to find that extra few $1,000s is within that taxes on these bonuses. If you are curious about this and some tactics, I encourage you to join our Slack community and chat with us about this directly. But this is a really nice lever to pull in your negotiation process. All right, negotiation steps. This is where it gets fun. I think it's really important to start out with gratitude because this is a preview of you as an employee. So keep in mind during this negotiation process, they can pull the offer at any time. So you always want to maintain a lot of gratitude and you want to maintain a lot of professionalism during the process. So I love it when candidates are really excited and they seem really excited about the offer, even if they go on to negotiate it. Expressing that they are excited about the opportunity, they see and they love the mission of the company, and they can't wait to join, that sets the negotiation off on the right foot. So I always would start with that. So typically what is going to happen is you will have a phone call with either HR or your recruiter to lay out the details of the offer. Now, this is often followed with the offer in writing, but not always. Some companies enjoy having the back and forth as a verbal process, so they only have to write up the offer one time because it is kind of a lot of work to go through all the approval processes to get that approved formally. So a lot of companies will start with a phone call. They'll lay out the details of the offer. You get to ask lots of questions. They'll usually send you the benefits documentation at that time. And that is a great time to just say, I am so excited about this. I can't wait to dig into the details. Can I have 24 hours? Don't make it a long timeline. 24 hours is appropriate. You should show an appropriate level of enthusiasm in your timeline as well. Usually at this stage, the companies are pretty excited and they want to move quickly. So if you can say, let me have tonight to think on this. Can we chat again tomorrow at 10 a.m.? That gives a nice concrete timeline. It shows that you're on it. You're gonna go through the details and really think about it that evening, which you should do. So you are going to start by absorbing the details. You'll listen on that phone call with that recruiter or HR person. If you can get it in writing, that will help you. If not, take notes during the process. And you can ask that right up front. Am I going to get this in writing? If no, get out your pen and paper and start taking notes. And then take a beat. You do not need to respond on that call. You do not need to respond that day. You get to think it through because this is a huge decision on your part. Next thing, I'm going to put this in here. This really should have been done like before this whole process, but it's worth noting. You really should know the market for that area. So you need to research the cost of living if you're moving, and you need to research the salaries in that area. Our Slack community is a fantastic place to do that. So if you have questions about your specific type of job, especially in our accelerator, we can sort of dig in and even pull some data around that. So do think about that, but it's great to research that before you get there. A word of warning, don't research this on Glassdoor. That is my only ask. Glassdoor is not a great place to find information like this because everybody self-reports on Glassdoor. And titles between different companies don't mean the same thing. So we often see, just as an example, scientist at some companies means a non-PhD, basically the equivalent of a research associate at other companies. Where, so you're looking at degree differences, years of experience differences. It's a completely different actual job. So what you will see on Glassdoor are these really wide ranges. And it's difficult to understand what a range might be. For scientists, you might see something like 80,000 to 160,000, which is just not helpful. Like that is not a helpful range. So you need to think about, your region and the jobs in your region. And so working with an expert on that is ideal if you can. And networking, using your LinkedIn network, people do talk and they will share kind of ranges with you. So that should have been done previously, but worth noting here. All right. The next thing is to set realistic expectations. So this is where you sit down and you think really, really deeply about what your priorities are. So if you have two jobs that you're considering and one has more room for growth, but it's going to be a more intense workplace. The other one has maybe more like work-life balance, but you don't think there's as many opportunities for advancement. Either one of those is fine. It just depends on what you want. So thinking about your priorities and like I said, some people have chosen companies or prioritized offers just based on the benefits package. So it's all up to you and it is your decision. So think about what your priorities are and what really matters to you. And then after that, determine what you think the acceptable ranges are. What is your target? Now, even if you get an offer that is within that acceptable range, it doesn't mean you shouldn't negotiate something. It just means that maybe then you have the luxury to negotiate that leadership coaching piece instead of maybe the actual compensation. And just to note on compensation, there are a couple of different terms that you might hear about compensation. So, total direct compensation is the whole package, which includes that stock, the equity, if applicable, the benefits, everything. We're going to talk about how to negotiate in terms of total cash because that is the take home. That's typically the components of your base and your bonus and bonuses. If you have a signing bonus, that's what hits your bank account this year. And so that's usually what you're thinking about negotiating, unless you have a really long-term view and you plan on being with a company through a liquidity event, and that equity piece is important. Okay, so this is the anatomy of a counter offer, and we have some scripts for this as well in our library. So if you're wondering, how you might craft your own, we can certainly help with that. But I always start. So now it's the next day. You've had the evening. You've really thought this over. You are ready to go into the negotiation. This is, again, take the time to thank them and express enthusiasm, but do it in the present tense. So, a way to do this is thank you so much for presenting the offer to me yesterday. I am very excited to join the company. So, you are, not I was, or it is exciting. You are excited to join it. That way, they know that you are forward thinking and you are planning to make this work. That again sets the tone for the rest of the conversation. The next thing you might say is, I took the evening and gave it some thought. I was hoping to get X in total cash compensation. The offer is really close when I add up the base and bonus. So express like, hey, we're almost there. We're getting there. My total cash, again, I'll use the $100,000. Let's say the offer came in at 100,000 base with a 10% target bonus, which would be $110,000 in total cash. So at that point, if you were really hoping for $115,000, you're really only $5,000 off. That can be accomplished, or at least you can get closer to that. Now, you may not get all the way there because there might be a little back and forth, but you can say, I was really hoping for $115,000 in total cash. I'm curious if there's any wiggle room in the base salary or target bonus, or maybe even the addition of a small signing bonus. So you're giving now your recruiter or your HR person all these different levers to pull, so they don't feel like, oh, I can't go any higher on that base because that's totally maxed out the range in that band. So you're now planting the seed, like, okay, it could be a signing bonus that could work, and then additionally, like I said, you might be able to say something like, additionally, I could be happy with say I'd like to be on the management track. And I could also be happy with a reimbursement or a company paid executive coach so that I could accomplish that, on a faster timeline. So you can sort of throw that in if you're really close and you wouldn't mind not getting that total cash up. So that's typically the framework of the counter offer. This gives your recruiter or HR person the impression that you are absolutely in it. You want to work there. You are planning for the future, and you're just trying to figure out how you can get just a little closer to what you had in your mind for your lifestyle and your needs. So I'm just going to leave you with one last thing. I, I can't emphasize this enough. You have to be really professional in this negotiation process because they are also still interviewing you. You have not landed the job yet. And I have seen people totally blow it at this stage because they were too aggressive with their negotiation tactics, they were inflexible, or they weren't responsive. This absolutely baffles me, but we have had candidates who are very slow to respond at this stage. And we're still interviewing you. So we're still evaluating your ability to be a good colleague. So I've seen companies pull offers if things are just not going well because they're not getting the sense that this person is really committed or that they'll be a responsive employee. So with that, I'm going to see if we have any questions. And hey there.
Hey, so we haven't had any questions come in yet, but there is still time. But I actually have a question for
Yeah.
you. So I followed all your tips. I have talked to the recruiter or the hiring manager. I've negotiated, and they've probably said something like, "Hey, let me get back to you and see what we can do."
Yeah.
And then 24 hours goes by. At which point is it appropriate for me to reach back out and say, "Hey, I wanted to follow up on our discussion. Where are we?"
Yeah, I think the 24-hour mark is exactly where I would do that. So for me personally, I don't think that's pushy. I think it's purely that you are showing that enthusiasm, and I think that's how you frame that. Is that, hey, enjoyed our call yesterday. I'm really excited to get the ball rolling on this. Any thoughts on that negotiation? And I think if you still don't hear back after that, that's a bit of a red flag for you as a candidate. You're still interviewing the company, just like they're still interviewing you. You haven't committed to anything. And so if they're being weird at this stage, that's a red flag. So you can always get some feedback from your friends and colleagues or in our community if that's happening to you, and we can sort of unpack that with you.
Yeah, and I think on that line, like another thing we hear about is people who are nervous about negotiating at all. I'm sorry, I have a fly in here. Um, people who are nervous about negotiating at all, thinking that the ask is going to get their offer pulled away. And I think that is a red flag. If you can't be honest with what you're looking for in your job search and they do pull the offer, I mean, what do you think? If your negotiation is reasonable, let's start with that.
Yeah, I think that's key is you if they come in really, really low, like really low, and you are surprised by that. There's a couple of things. First of all, this could be a you problem because you might not have communicated early in the process what your expectations were. And there are lots of chances to do that. Now, you don't have to nail down an exact number, but there is usually a ballpark discussion. And we like to do that really early. We like to do that pretty much the first call with our candidates so that we know that because we have an idea of what the company's salary bands are. So if a candidate comes to us and says, well, I'm hoping to make $300,000, and we're like, oh, okay, well, this role is actually $120,000 base, we're going to just be upfront about that. And then that conversation is out of the way early. And again, if you haven't done your research properly and you are thinking about, my friends in San Francisco are making $150,000 right out of their PhD. So I want $150,000, but I don't want to leave Colorado. Well, that's not a reasonable expectation. So there's going to be, if you want to make top dollar, then you're going to live in San Francisco or Cambridge or New York City, where your dollar goes a lot less far. So, there's so many considerations there. So it might be a you problem if you get to that point and you're nervous to ask because it's so much of a gulf that you have to cross. But if you're nervous to ask and it's a reasonable ask, why are you nervous to ask? I think that's a really good question. Was there something during the process that made you think that the company's inflexible? Were they jerks? Like what about that whole process is making you nervous to make the ask? And
Yeah.
again, that's something we can unpack in the Slack community. I would love to know if that's happening to anybody.
Yeah, and I think that's valuable too. If you are sitting on an offer and you're ready to negotiate it, if you need a little gut check, like, hey, I was thinking about proposing it like this, just come
Mhm.
ask us and we'll tell you, like, nope, that is totally not going to happen. Or like, yeah, we see something like that and think that's fine. So As always, thank you so much for joining us for Ask a Recruiter. If you have questions, please join us in the free Slack community. Like I said, we'll drop the link below. I'm happy to answer any questions, and especially any about today's session on negotiating offers. So, Karina, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. See you all later.
Bye.